traces of anyone I know. They're with the people and out there with the crowd. I've got no final basis to keep my head unbowed. A change is gonna come. It's gonna come. The time has come for making a new place in my head. It's either that or breaking what I've got left instead. There with the people and out there with the crowd. The moment of mistaking, of living life out loud. A change is gonna come. Oh, it's gonna come. Time has come for making a new place in my head. It's either that or breaking what I've got left instead. There with the people and out there with the crowd. The moment of mistaking, of living the life out loud. A change is gonna come. Oh, it's gonna come.
That's what I'm talking about. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to a special edition of us here on Twitch. My name is Arvin Eleron, typically your host, although today I am only going to be a humble assistant of sorts, you might say, as we get ready here for the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers in December. I am very excited about this because I learn so much every time the incomparable Cat Rambo is able to teach this class with us, and I am looking forward to more of her information today. But before we get there, I do want to remind everybody about ways to support the stream. If you haven't done so already, please consider following the channel here on Twitch. You can do that by clicking that button right underneath the video window. Please check out the YouTube channel with the !ArvTube. The Twitter is !ArvTweets, and that is always appreciated because the Twitter is going to give you the access to my Twitter, where I always tweet when I'm going live and announcements about the channel and other things going on with me. So that would be very much appreciated. !Arv tweets would be for that. !Arv Cord is the Discord channel where you can check out the Arvanauts in between streams, which is always a good thing. On every single thing. Yes, exactly. That's totally exactly what happens. You're 100% right, Echo. So yes, !Arv Cord for that. And then you can find all this on my website, arvineleron.com. My information on the financial side of things, !Arv Shop is, of course, the place where you can find us for merchandise, especially stuff relating to my Infinity and Beyond crew, which is playing Curse of Strahd currently, and also Adventures of Middle-earth, with the amazing cartooning work of the professional cartoonist Terry Toons, who's also one of the players on that campaign. And then last but certainly not least, of course, we've got !Arvtreon. That is the Patreon, currently sitting at $3.13. Cool stuff for you, cool stuff for the channel. And that sub button, which is sitting right above the video window, which will allow you to get awesome custom emotes and allow you to have those sub badges and all these good things, and also lets you get inspiration to support the players and all these other kinds of things. And so you've got all all that going on as well. One quick announcement, which is tomorrow evening, there will be a special live stream from the Lily Pad in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where my progressive rock band, The Road, will be playing a show that'll be starting at, I believe, 10:30, if I'm not mistaken. So you should tune in for that. And if you're near Cambridge, Massachusetts, you should check that out because it will be awesome. That's going to be happening tomorrow. But right now, we are going to be back with the, as I said, amazing Cat Rambo, and I'm going to transition over right now. There we are. Look at that. Absolutely spectacular. It worked just the way I intended it to. So it is my great pleasure to welcome again Cat Rambo to the channel and her amazing Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers, the class that we are calling today Setting Up the Story Kit. Cat, how are you?
I'm doing well. It is cold and rainy here in Seattle, but that is the norm.
It's standard, right?
It is. It really is.
It is a typical thing, but nonetheless, it is not cold and rainy in this channel because we are excited for your class today. So I'm going to mention, everyone, in the spirit of Christmas, in the spirit of the holiday season, we are letting the chat remain open for this one. So even if you are not a sub, you will be able to ask questions, to dialogue, to speak back and forth with Kat, and she will encourage you to do that over the next hour-ish as this class is being conducted. And so I am going to shut up and I am going to let her hold forth. And Kat, the floor is yours.
Hello. Hi, everybody. It is nice to see you. It is yet another month has rolled by and it's time to do another one of these 1-hour classes. I wanted to mention that the class I did a month or so ago, the tool set for creating immersive worlds, have actually turned into an on-demand class. So if you want to go through it and work through it with writing exercises and stuff, it is now available, and I will give it to you at the end of the class. But while I have you, I also mention that lots of new live classes coming up, including tomorrow. James Sutter, who you may know from Paizo and Starfinder, is doing a class called the Freelancer's Toolkit. So if you are thinking about freelancing in 2020, he should have all sorts of useful stuff to teach. One of my dirty secrets is that I schedule classes because I want to take them. So I'm very excited about James's class. I'm sure I will learn lots of interesting things. So with this class, I have called it Setting Up the Story Kit. And what I wanted to talk about is things that are over on one end of the pantsers versus outliner continuum. And if you're not familiar with what I mean by pantser versus outliner, basically we talk about people who like to just sit down and write as writing by the seat of their pants. They just sit down and they see where the story takes them. And then at the other end of things is the person who knows exactly what's going to happen. They have an outline. They know maybe how long the story is going to be and the names of all the characters and all of that stuff. And that both of these are perfectly valid ways to write. And all the moments in between, the various variations on this, are all totally valid. It's what works for you. I do think that the more work you put in ahead of time on a story or a novel or a piece of writing, the less work you will have to do revising. Now, is that a one-to-one correlation where 1 minute of preparation beforehand corresponds to 1 minute saved of editing time? I do not know. But I would suspect, based on my experience, that the ratio is more like 1 minute of preparation time is equal to 2 or 3 minutes of revision time, or 2 or 3 minutes of walking around the block going, oh my God, how did I work myself into this terrible corner that I now can't get myself out of, which is a valid writing moment as well. So I wanted to give you some tools and techniques for things that you can do before you write the story, things that you can do ahead of time that may save you time later. Now, if you were with me for the Writing an Immersive World you will remember how beautifully organized that class was, and how I was like, here's the first set and it's 3 tools, and here's the second set and there's 3 tools, and we'd even got to the here's the bonus set and there was 3 tools. This is not as neatly laid out as that. Basically, I tried to think about things that I have done to save myself time and that have been useful. Um, and this is a scatter shot approach. Should you take your notes from this class and go and try and do every single one? Probably not. Certainly, you could try that. It would be valid. I would not scoff at you for it. But what I would suggest instead is that you look for the things where you're like, oh, that's a cool idea, or that resonates for me in some way, or I think that really would be helpful, or even just that sounds like tons of fun. I want to do it. Any of those are valid reasons for doing it. So kind of pick and choose from among the tools. So one of your major categories, or at least kind of the 3 categories of tools that I've talked about in the past, are character and world and setting. And there's things that you can do with all of those. But another thing that you can think about before you begin to write a story is mood. What is the mood of the story? What is the emotional feelings? What is the atmosphere? If this was a movie, would it be in black and white, or would it be in hyper realistic color? What would the soundtrack be like? Um, and the difficulties with me kind of giving you an exhaustive list here is that different people think in different ways. I don't really think in terms of soundtracks, and so it's always interesting to me to do soundtracks. I recently had to do one for a book, um, but I don't usually have music while I'm writing. On the other hand, somebody who is deeply influenced by music might benefit immensely from creating a soundtrack ahead of time to write to. If you are writing space opera and cue up 30 minutes of kind of intense space glam rock that you want to write to for a 30-minute time writing, that might be very handy. So as you are thinking about mood and thinking about kind of what you want the mood of the story to be like, think about how you get yourself in that mood, because it will be easier for you to write in it if you are experiencing it. And I'm sure that you have noticed that when you are feeling gloomy, it's hard to write happy, and vice versa. So if you want your story, let's say, for example, I decided recently to work on a story where I was like, screw it. I am going to pull out all the emotional stops. I have had critics in the past accuse me of being emotionally manipulative, and I'm going to write one where I'm just like, I'm going to make everybody go, oh, that's so fucking cute. And part of that is that it's a story that I want to give my godkid, and she is a relatively unsophisticated reader, so I know kind of how to enchant her. But also, it's kind of fun to write that sort of story. So my story has a baby griffin in it, because how cute is a baby griffin? And in order to kind of prep myself to write kind of quintessential cute baby griffin, I go and look at pictures of baby animals and think about what it is that makes me go, "Oh, that's so cute." Like, what are the things that animals do, or that aspects of them? I actually have a Pinterest board that is nothing but pictures of baby animals, and it is usually I have read too many comments on the internet. Now I need to reassure myself that the world is still good remedy. But as far as like creating cute baby griffins, this board will be of immense use to me. So uh, when I'm about to write a scene where I'm focusing on the baby griffin's cuteness, I will probably go look at the baby animals on my board and I will get myself in the right sort of mood. This is uh, one of the things that writers often do. If you are writing in a particular time period, it's often good to get yourself in the right mindset for that time period. Yes, they are cute until they bite your hand off. It depends on the baby animal, right? Well, I mean, I think about I've been watching the Baby Yoda phenomenon with great interest because it is clearly they have just been like, we are going to just cute people into buying the Disney Channel. And the more I see of it, the more I'm just like, screw you. I am not buying the Disney Channel because you are being manipulative. Uh, but if you look at it, they have kind of analyzed cuteness. Go through and look to see what makes him so adorable, and then see if you can use it in the story. If you want to write a cute story. Um, if so, basically, I mean, ways that you can establish a mood. I mean, you can dwell on it. You can uh, listen to music that evokes it for you. You can, kind of do goofy stuff like eat food that evokes it for you is a possibility. But sort of immersing yourself in media that evokes that mood is probably one of the best things that you can do. If you are going to write a grand, eloquent, wonderful, universe spanning space opera, go watch and read and listen to things that echo that, things that have big themes. You're not looking for things that you're going to copy, but you're looking for things that are going to kind of shape the way you think, the way that you put stuff together. I hope that that all makes sense. And I'm watching the chat window, so if you have questions, feel free to ask them. Questions, preferably about what I'm talking about, is generally more useful. So thinking about kind of emotion, thinking about a mood, how you're going to, what you want to set up, how you're going to set it up, um, how you're going to evoke it. One of the things that I've heard suggested to people sometimes is that they write a poem about a scene before they write it. And that is one way to kind of figure out the images and mood of the piece. Now, that seems somewhat work intensive to me. I have not done it. Oh, that sounds absolutely freaking adorable. The baby, I never remember it's bestiary or bestiary, but I just great artwork of baby mythical. Yeah, I just my Twitter uh, profile. I just switched it around because I got somebody to draw it when it has a baby griffin in it. It's just freaking adorable. Okay, that's just of no use to you whatsoever in writing. Okay, so mood is something that you can establish. Another thing that you can think about in this way and that you can spend some time expanding on and kind of getting to know beforehand is the voice of the story, particularly if you are writing in first person, right? If you are writing in that I and me uh, voice, thinking about the character's voice, thinking about what it's like, thinking about the words and expressions that they use, thinking about their educational background, thinking about the experiences that have shaped them. If they are a sailor, they may use nautical terms or nautical slang or filthy sailor obscenities. Um, all of those are. Oh, that's a great question. How would you use any one or all of the five senses to draw out the mood of a story? So with them, I would think about what it is with that sense that puts me in that mood. For example, let's say I'm writing a Christmas story. Because it's Christmas right now, and so for smell, right? There are Christmas smells, cinnamon and pumpkin spice and all of that. I might actually put some potpourri on while I'm writing and put that have that going. I might bake a pumpkin pie because A, I would have pumpkin pie then, and B, because it would smell terrific and might seep into the story. Uh, I might listen to Christmas music while I'm doing it. Um, if I have that, if I have the smells going, then I've probably got a little bit of taste going. As far as touch goes, I might actually sit and think about the touches that I associate with the holidays. Um, one of the things that I remember very strongly about growing up are the Christmas trees that my family got. And not just the smell, but the sort of the feeling of the needles on your hands while you were hanging the ornaments, and how they kind of, prickle at your hands as you were trying to kind of stick them in deep enough into the branches. That was always, I really loved the Christmas tree. I would love to somehow use that in a story. So if I was writing a Christmas story, I might think also about the moments, the intense sensory moments that represent that holiday to me. Now, um, let's say you're being all fantasy science fictiony, and want a holiday that it's like Christmas but isn't Christmas. It's, Smigglemas. Again, you don't have to have uh, use the exact spices and smells of Christmas, but think of comparable ones, because Smigglemas will have its own smells and tastes. Oh, yeah. Flannel PJs and the sound of crinkling wrapping paper, the Yule log, all of that is just lovely. There's so much wonderful things about holidays to think about. And I think I've mentioned before that daydreaming is a very valid use of your time as a writer, as long as you're doing some writing to go along with it. But sitting and staring off into space and thinking about the mood of the story, thinking about the senses of a story, thinking about what you're going to put into it, all of that is very valid writing time. And often, or at least some people can do this, and I've done it. Sometimes you can actually avoid writing the story, but just keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it, to get to the point where it's just like, screw you, I am going to bubble out, and it will appear pretty much ready to go, which is a nice feeling. I hope that that makes sense. Okay. Um, All right, so I'm going to go back to talking about the voice. With the voice, listen to it and hear it in your head. Write a letter or monologue from that character. Uh, think about the voices that they have listened to in the past. We often have things that we say which are things that our parents said. It's always interesting to be talking to somebody and hear them say something and think, oh, that's a parent thing. Often older expressions, you'll be like, oh, that's not you, that's your parent. Um, Stuff like that, things that are going to shape them. Somebody who is highly educated is going to speak differently than somebody who is not. Somebody who's in a hurry is going to speak very differently than somebody who is leisurely and never rushed about things. Do I find that any one sense could convey a mood quicker or easier than another? Yeah, okay. I absolutely. I think that in terms of using senses, there's a kind of hierarchy. And you can, as far as like vision and sound goes, those are ones that television uses. So they're kind of played out. If you're using taste and smell, those are incredibly evocative. Those are ones that kind of pull the reader in and often have emotional implications. And then the sensory thing that's going to be the most valuable to you is physical stuff, because that's not just sandpaper versus silk. That's nausea. That's that feeling of having eaten too much and you're sitting back in your chair because you are full after holiday dinner. It is that feeling of the cold. It is the feeling of snowflakes hitting your face. It is the feel of the fire, which is so hot on your front while your back can remain so cold. All of those are going to be helpful. Um, so that's I try to always try to have physical stuff in there, and then smell is, I think, also really useful. Yeah, I think that one of the reasons that the suggestion to write a poem about a scene works well is because you do have to think in terms of images, and you do have to think in terms of concrete things rather than abstract things. And so I think it can really end up making a description sharper. Um, I am a big fan of writers working with poetry at the same time because I think if you are working on poetry, it is something that sharpens your skills tremendously. All right. So establishing voice along the same lines, thinking about what your character was doing before the story started. Thinking about, what, in fact, what were they doing the week before the story started? Were they there? Were they doing something else? Where did they expect to be a week before? Uh, because they don't just sort of spring into the world of fiction fully formed. They have all sorts of influences and things outside the world of the story. Is it possible to give them a secret that you never reference over the course of the story? Is it possible to give them something that they're hiding? Is it possible to give them something that they're conflicted about? How can you make your character more interesting? How can you make them more complicated? How can you make their life more complicated? Yeah, turning poems into short stories is, I think, a really good idea and a lot of fun to do. And there's also one of the reasons that I like flash fiction is because sometimes it's playing around in an area where you're kind of sometimes maybe it's a prose poem and sometimes it's a flash fiction piece. Maybe it's both at the same time. Rachel Swirsky and I have done a number of pieces together. One of the things that I do is I have Google document that has a whole bunch of story beginnings on it. And sometimes if people want to collaborate, I just share the document and say, here, just take this and see if there's anything you want to run with. And Rachel grabbed a bunch of those and she said, oh, they're done. All you need to do is put them in poem form. And she actually went through and set them up differently rather than as sort of blocks of prose. I was like, oh shit, you're right. They are poems. They are complete. They are done. I thought that was really interesting. All right. Um, when you're thinking about your character, think about their attitudes towards some basic things. And there are some things which everybody has opinions on, and yet they vary widely. One of those is work. Another is food, right? Who knows somebody whose diet consists primarily of dietary quirks? We all have at least one person in our lives. I'm poking a little fun at that. Their attitudes towards cleanliness. Are they somebody who, when they are walking past the sink of dirty dishes, cannot stand it and stops and washes them? Or are they capable of ignoring that set of dirty dishes as it gets worse and worse and worse in a silent war with a housemate? What are their attitudes towards sleep? Do they figure they'll sleep when they're dead, or are they somebody who really, really loves their getting their 10 hours of sleep each night? Do they fall asleep easily, or do they lie there and think about things? Um, are they somebody who enjoys physical affection or somebody who shies away from it? And if so, kind of why? Often our ideas are shaped by that. My One of my Patreon people saying something. So we will have this will be recorded, so it will be available afterwards as well. Um, Sort of pausing to see if there's any questions about that, about the character stuff. I think that one of the things that you want to think about with your character is how can you make them distinctive? How can you make them different? How can you make them not cliche? How can you make them seem real? Because real human beings are complicated, messy, uh, just horrible masses of desires that often are in conflict with each other. And you're never going to be able to replicate quite that spaghetti mash of impulses, but do make your character a bit more complicated than just somebody who's like, they want money or they just want love or something like that. Make them more complicated. Um, these are all things that you can do before you start the story, before you start thinking about it, before you start figuring out what happens in it. One thing that I was thinking about as sort of a way to prod yourself along is to think in terms of somewhat arbitrary achievements. And I was thinking about this because I was playing Skyrim. And as you know, or may not know, Skyrim on the Xbox has various achievements, and some of them are kind of reasonable things like, level X, and others are something like, you bought 500 cabbages or that sort of thing. So think about achievements that you want, things that you want to accomplish in the course of the story. Are there things that you want to get done? Uh, there were a whole bunch of us at Hopkins that studied with the same professor, and he often used the example of using the word aubergine, which means eggplant, in a story, and how difficult it was to work in, which meant that I think every single person in that class produced at least one short story with the word aubergine in it. So think of your aubergines and how you want to stick them in the story. So Game Master's been saying, I use a song for characters and even scenes to help me get deeper into that character's personality or the flow of a scene. Like Star Wars is a theme for each character. Yeah, I think that's a really valid way to do that. Um, I get distracted by music sometimes, so I tend not to use it. But I did recently. I had a novelette come out, Carpe Glitter, and one of the things that a blogger asked me for was for a playlist to go along with the book, and so I ended up putting together this YouTube playlist of I think 20 songs that I felt sort of expressed the book. And so I'd love to sit down, I intend to do this at some point with a story, sit down beforehand and create the playlist and then write based on that playlist. I'm looking to see if I can find that playlist really fast. Oh, here we go. Carpe Glitter, fantasy novelette playlist. And let's just pause there. I'll stick that in. So there's an example of the playlist which I did, which has a lot of kind of like French electro pop and funk and some older songs because it's got a lot of it's got basically Nazi robots and stuff. Yeah, some kinds of music help your focus, but it is specific to that kind of music. And I will say Bach cello suites are actually, if I'm listening to music, those are something that I don't mind at all. I mean, Bach uh, works very well. I think it's anything that's instrumental. For me, if it's something that has words, particularly if it has sort of catchy, jingly words, I am sunk because those catchy, jingly words will find their way into the fiction. One of my favorite pieces of music to write to is Kay Gardner's A Rainbow Path, which is all instrumental. So, yeah, yeah. Yo-Yo Ma on cello is, I think, just absolutely superlative. And Dead Can Dance is one of the bands that I go to. I do like a lot of world music for that. Yeah, and you could go for if you wanted a really sort of peppy poppy feel, you could go listen to really sort of peppy poppy music. I have a story that I wrote a while back where they basically wanted it based with like 70s disco music theme stuff. And there I did have a soundtrack where I had, I think, 10 different disco music pieces that I listened to over and over again. Yeah, no, they really can. Really, lyrics can help you with how you think. And you can. Uh, it is a valid story impulse to listen to the lyrics of a piece of music and say, "I'm going to write something from that character's point of view." We've talked before about where ideas come from, and having a song and wanting to write more from that character. I mean, you're not going to take pieces of the song and stick them willy nilly into your story. That would be kind of shitty, as well as intellectual property theft. But certainly you could write something that was inspired by it. So all of this is stuff that will help you with the story that you're thinking about it. Um, Going back to the idea of arbitrary achievements, and one of the things I've got written down here is 3 moments of landscape. 3 moments in your story where you're thinking, okay, I'm going to have them pause and look at the landscape and it's going to be really cool. Or I'm going to have them pause and look at the landscape and get a specific impression. Um, if you are writing horror fiction, right, this is one of the places where you really can set mood by describing the landscape in a particular way. Now, you could combine this with a pantsing approach. You could uh, basically sort of use the music or the mood stuff to sort of shape you at a sort of like grandiose, way up here level, and then just sort of like see where it takes you. And I'm sure that would be fine. I really, as far as this stuff goes, the point is writing words. The point is writing words and not worrying about whether they're words of genius or not. And you may say to yourself, if I just focus on writing words, I'm just going to write a whole bunch of mediocre words. And the fact of the matter is that most writers, the place where the genius is happening is in the rewriting. The place where the horrible slog is happening is in the kind of getting those word lumps generated. But the place where things are being made into the wonderful moments is really in the rewriting and the revising. Okay. Um, One of the things that I think is really handy, particularly if you're stuck on a story and not quite sure where you want to go with it, is to write a scene that you know will not happen. It will not be included in the story. And that's kind of a trick in some ways, because basically you're saying to your mind, okay, you can write this and it doesn't really matter. It's not going to go into the story, so you can do whatever you like with it. And I'm going to say tricks are an absolutely valid way to get your writing done. And if this is what it takes, go for it. And you can always write the scene and then later on kind of be like, haha, it is going in the story. There is nothing that says you can't change your mind if you have to trick yourself into doing it. Um, but I wanted to mention a couple of things that I think that you should not do beforehand. And these are things that you should keep out of your story kit. And they all have a big label that reads expectations. And one of them is expecting to write good words, expecting to write genius. I cannot think of any way to paralyze oneself more thoroughly than to sit down and go, oh my God, I have to write a good story. And in fact, I have a hard time sometimes with bespoke stories, by which I mean stories that somebody has asked me for an anthology. And I'm sure that unless I screw up terribly, they're probably going to take the story. And at the same time, I will sit down to write those and I'll just be like, oh, I have to write a story that is publishable, and I will forget this, and I will not give myself permission to just sort of write crap and then make it into a better story, and so I will find myself procrastinating. Don't do this. Give yourself permission to write crap. Don't tell yourself that you're going to write genius. You're not going to make it a better story by looking in the mirror when you get up in the morning and saying, I'm going to write a story that's going to win the World Fantasy Award today. That you're just going to set unreasonable expectations on yourself. Along the same lines, and this is something which may vary from person to person, I don't think it's a good idea to try to write to a particular word length. I think when you sit down and you are trying consciously to say, okay, this is a novella, or this is going to be 1,500 words, or wherever you hope for it to land, I think that you end up thinking about the length more than you end up thinking about the writing, and it gets in the way. So I would always suggest, don't worry about length. You can always chop things down. You really can, and you can do it brutally. One of my favorite short stories of all time that I wrote started as a 750 word piece. And I ended up trimming it down for a contest where the upper limit was 250 words. So I cut it by 2/3, and boy, that is a taut and beautiful little piece, and it emerged much better for it. That's a useful skill. You can also pad if you need to. Some people have varying degrees of skill with one or the other, but sitting down and saying, I'm going to write 1,500 words is very close to saying, I'm going to sit down and write 1,500 very good words. Yeah, a scene where the main character was bullied as a child, right? Or a scene where something happened that affects their attitudes about things. One of the things that I often think about is what is a character's attitude towards money, right? Because we all have people have different attitudes towards money. Some people find it painful to spend money. Some people have the wallet which has every kind of uh, meal, frequent, stamp card that they could ever possibly use, while other people are stopping and giving the real change vendor $20 and saying, I don't need change, or they are tipping well. Well, there's like differing attitudes towards money. Those attitudes come from somewhere. There's something that shapes them. Maybe it is a parent who stressed something over and over again. Maybe it's something that happened. Maybe their family went bankrupt when they were little and they went from rich to poor and they've never kind of gotten over that. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe they went from poor to rich and they've never kind of gotten used to having enough on the table. All of that are things that shape your character, that shapes what they want, that shapes how they're going to go after things. It's going to shape how they see things. Um, I just finished a interesting book, which is I finished Anne Leckie's The Raven Tower, which is fantasy. And if you're familiar with her work, she's got this wonderful space opera series, which starts with Ancillary Justice. And I was thinking about The Raven Tower because it does something with gender. It has a character who is a particular gender, and it's not a sort of ticky box thing. It's not a, I'm going to do this in order to make my book diverse. It's a gender that genuinely complicates things, that adds resonance to at least one scene, and that deepens the character. And so, one of the things that I would suggest is, with all your characters who are different, who are not of the mainstream, who are not like yourself, is go through and think to yourself, how can I use this difference to deepen the plot? How can I use this difference to deepen the character? How can I make this difference a more integral part of the story? Because that's what you want with diversity. You want it to be part of the story. You don't want it to be something that you kind of glue on in order to get the PC stamp of approval. You want it to genuinely reflect diversity. Um, yeah, I think that's reasonably clear, I hope. I really recommend The Raven Tower. It was just fabulous, and I'm very resentful that Anne is so good at science fiction and now turns out to be so good at fantasy as well. It is just unfair. This is basically, I think, that most of the notes that I had jotted down about the story kit. Like a lot of the classes that I do for this channel, I'm thinking about putting it together into a longer session. And in fact, next time that I teach, I'm going to do one called The Power of Names. I'm going to talk about names and titles and sort of focus on that. But if you have questions about things that you think about for the story. Oh, here's something that I wanted to mention also is chronology can be super pain in the butt. And by chronology, I mean the order in which stuff happens. And of course, one of the things that complicates that is that you could tell the story in perfect chronological order, but you also don't have to, right? You could tell it and you could jump around and you can have flashbacks and flash forwards and all sorts of stuff. And so that can get pretty complicated, particularly if you are working with a longer work that has multiple points of view. And so it is very handy, I think, to have a spreadsheet with basically a column for each of the characters and then the timeline going down this side. And then you can go through and go, okay, at this point in time, this character is here, this character is here, this character is here. And it will help you avoid some of the complications and just terrible mistakes that will have you tearing your hair out and going, I don't understand it. I need the character to be here, and yet they're here. Is there any process that I go through for my characters? And outline pages of text go with the flow. With my characters, at a sort of very basic level, I try to think about how do they change over the course of the story or book. With the book that I'm working on right now, finishing up the final draft of Exiles of Tibet, the character's journey from uh, sort of a brutalized PTSD victim to recovering from that, recovering from the experience that caused that, was basically the emotional arc of the book. Uh, so I try to think about how the character is going to change over time. If you have multiple characters or multiple points of view and you are having trouble keeping them straight, one thing that can be handy, and it can be possible, particularly if you're using something like Scrivener where it's easy to merge stuff, put all of the sections about a particular character together and then read them through as though they were a single piece. And then you can take them apart and braid them back into the others, but you will be able to see them kind of in one long pass, and that may be super useful. As far as like the backstory type reference, I keep some notes, but most of it I keep in my head, I think. This is one of the advantages of writing short stories that use the same characters or novels that use the same characters, is that you do begin to pin some of this information down in your head and be able to sort of consult it without thinking about it. But if you have it, a whole bunch of stuff that you need to track, a wiki. I like a wiki. Wiki is useful. Thank you for subscribing, Lone Wolf. Thank you. Yay. Other things that I want, oh, I did. So I wanted to mention that spreadsheet thing. That's something that I got from Tim Powers. I think it is super useful. And it is one of those things that if you are writing a complicated book, boy, you should do it, I think, sooner rather than later. Because if you do it sooner, then you can use it to avoid creating mistakes. Whereas if you do it later, you will end up with a complicated thing that you're going to have to go back and go, okay, well, this contradicts this, and I've got to fix this. And this contradicts this, and I've got to fix this. And it gets super complicated. All right. Looking to see what else I said here. What would I say is the biggest takeaway from this? One, don't be afraid to daydream. Don't be afraid to stare off into space Don't be afraid to think about what the weather is like in your scene, what things smell like, what things feel like. Is it cold or is it hot? Don't be afraid to really spend some time deeply imagining it. It will really be useful and it will show in the writing. So that's one thing that I would like you to take away. Another thing is, again, give yourself permission to write crap. The important thing is to write and to get the words out. There is a barrier inside you to writing those words. You must leap over that barrier and emerge with those words and not worry about whether they're crappy or not. And three, uh, it is quite possible that everything I have said is wrong for you. Everybody's writing process is different. Your job as a writer is to try lots of stuff, find the stuff that works for you and do it lots. And it is okay if you make some mistakes while you're doing it, and it's okay if things change. Anytime that you put words down on the page, that is a huge victory. So yay for you for putting words down. Any other questions that people want to ask before I wind down? I did want to mention a few things. Excuse me as I scratch my face in a most unprofessional way. Oh, I wrote notes about this. Okay, yeah. So as I said, there are live classes for the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers are up through next March. There are 27 sections. There are 8 guest teachers. There are 10 classes that are brand new. A couple that I'm really excited about. One is Nisi Shaw is going to be teaching A Taste of Writing the Other, which should be a super useful one. As I said this weekend, James Sutter, The Freelancer's Toolbox, I think is going to be super cool. And then another one that I'm looking forward to is Kate Hartfield is going to talk about writing interactive games. There's also a bunch of new on-demand games, on-demand classes. One's called Writing in the Cracks. It's about how to find time for writing, even if you don't think you have any. Immersive tool sets for writing immersive worlds is on demand now. We also have a new one by a guest teacher, deep dive into neopronouns, which should be kind of handy. We've also got, because it is Christmas and people are doing Christmas shopping, I mentioned there's special bundles, there's special Rambo Academy gift certificates. I think are very swell if you have a speculative fiction writer in your life. If you support me on Patreon, there's various wonderful perks, but one of the things that's coming up next week is those supporters are going to get a Christmas story. My name is Scrooge. So if you want fiction, come on over to the Patreon. So, and I think that is it. Arv, do you have anything that you want to add before we let these fine folk go off into the dark and stormy night?
The dark and stormy night. Other than to say that was very interesting, and I enjoyed it as I was sort of doing here, there, and everywhere. But I was always, as I always do, retweeting some of this too. Yeah, one of the things that's, first of all, thank you again, Lone Wolf, for the resub at tier 2. I appreciate that very much. One of the things that struck me about when you were talking about the idea of preparation is it strikes me you're talking about preparation without paralysis, and that in fact you're trying to prepare to avoid running into problems midway through the story. And that's interesting because it suggests that even very experienced writers can run into this problem where you start writing and all of a sudden you're like, and you kind of write yourself into a corner. Yeah. So it's not something which is just limited to beginners. I mean, this is something we all go through. So I guess I have one question that I wanted to ask you quickly, which is just, has your process has your amount of preparation changed over time, where you do more or less of it now than you used to in the past, do you think?
Absolutely has changed. And I do more preparation now.
Okay.
And I used to, it's very sad. Like there used to be those stories that would come and they'd come complete. Like you'd wake up and be like, oh, let me go to the keyboard, and you'd write them down and be like, oh, I wrote a story. Now I'll go to drink some coffee. and you think that's going to happen more, and actually it happens less, and it's so sad.
Why is
It's
that, do you
yeah,
think?
I don't know. I mean, I feel so much more confident now in my ability to take any idea and be able like to, okay, I'll produce a story from it. I mean, whereas before I used to get stymied by that, I'd be like, well, I don't know how I can make a story out of that. Now I'm just like, fuck it, here I go. Uh, but in terms of the stories that just sort of come full blown, really don't have those as much. Sometimes on the bus, I'll get flash fiction comes to me on the bus. Why? I don't know.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, and possibly also part of your brain that's kind of learned to develop very good complex stories.
Yeah.
Maybe that sort of means that it's not as easy to just dash one off out of nowhere and sort of wait for the muse to arrive and all that kind of stuff. But that's interesting, and I liked I've heard some of the advice about like don't be afraid to write crap. Give yourself permission to write crap, but a lot of these things put together really is, as you said, it's a story kit. I mean, it's really sort of all these tools that you can pull out and use when necessary to kind of assist you in moving things forward. So,
Yeah.
and getting things off on the right foot. So, this was really great stuff. And of course, and I will add to this, although of course I will see Kat next week for Espergenesis. I believe it's next week.
Yay!
So I'm excited about that. I was not able to do this the last time because of variety of illness and all these other things, but we will be able to do this next week, so that'll be great. But I do want to say, Kat, it's been a great pleasure to have you doing these classes for us, and thank you. It is very generous of you, and you folks should be checking out Kat on the Rambo Academy. And again, she has so many just amazing people that are presenting and doing things from all just this wide range is nice too. It's not just here, let me just teach the same class over and over again, but there's this great breadth to it. So I want to thank you for sharing a little bit of that with us every month, and I look forward to a wonderful 2020 of that sort of thing. Chat, what you can do is to spread the word about these things, because the more people that we can get in and participating in the conversation, the better it is for all. So, but Chat, can we get some love for Kat again? And Kat, I will speak to you next week. But again, thank you so much. And I will have this up on my YouTube channel tomorrow and have you on your own special playlist shortly. So thank you very much, Kat.
Awesome. I'm telling Lone Wolf 67, me too. Long walks are the best.
Oh yeah, for creative sort of processing.
So
I have to say also, quick note, one of my favorite, this is expensive and not beyond, not everyone can do this all the time, but I'll tell you, when I go to a Cirque du Soleil performance, I don't know what it is. Something fires up my, I love it, first of all.
Pricey.
But I know it's too expensive. And I'm a complete sucker. Like I want the water bottle and the whole deal. Like it is very pricey, but man, it's something about, I think it's because they are so good at getting into all the senses. So you really literally almost all the senses, including taste, because of food that they offer before the performance and everything else, at like $6 million for a hot dog. But still,
See, you wouldn't.
So
I thought you were going to be something like, I like to shower, but sometimes that means like the hot water.
I'm not. This is what I mean. Obviously, I can't do that most of the time. I mean, the last time I went was like 2 years ago. But when I do go, I get so many great ideas out of it. Seriously.
Oh yeah.
But anyway.
Oh, Trans-Siberian. I'm actually going on the 22nd here in Seattle.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Performance called The Bell Ringer, which if you know Peter O'Rulian, who is
Peter.
a fantasy writer, is part of that performance. So that's going to be fun to go to.
Yep.
He has promised me lots of fabulousness.
Well,
all right.
I'm sure it will be the case. But thank you so much, Kat, again, and we will see you next week. But thank you so much for a wonderful class again.
Bye, chat. Take care.
Bye for now. And that, folks, is going to do it for us for this evening for the class. That was a lot of fun. I always, as I said, I always learn just so much from this. And it's always a great pleasure to be able to see, a really gifted and, top level writer who really is able to just give us so many good ideas and concepts and theories and things that have really worked for her over a long time of producing really good work. And I think one of the things that's good about it too, I will say, as a teacher myself, and as someone who spends quite a bit of time thinking about these sorts of things, that it's really nice when someone's able to kind of process and be able to communicate that process to people as well. That really kind of makes a difference. And so it's really, she's also particularly good at being able to communicate this amazing process to us in a nice way. And so I had a great time watching that and learning, and I hope that you folks did as well. And we will have another one of these next month on another Thursday evening in all likelihood. But for now, that is going to do it for me, and I am going to sign off. I want to remind everybody that I will be back tomorrow for a special session, a live performance from my band. We were talking about music. I don't know how trippy my band is, but we are progressive rock. So my band, The Road, is going to be playing a show at the Lily Pad in Cambridge, Massachusetts. If anyone happens to be near that area, would love to see any or all of you there. The doors open at 10 o'clock. We'll be starting at 10:30, and we'll be featuring songs from all three of our albums, Monomyth, Drift, which was our first album, and 5 Years Later, which just came out last year. So we will have lots of stuff happening over there, and I will try to also broadcast this live on my Twitch channel. So if you stop back here tomorrow, you will see that being broadcast live. Then on Saturday evening at 7 p.m., we return to the land of Barovia with D&D and Curse of Strahd, which should be a really awesome time. That campaign is really doing really awesome, and I'm having a lot of fun with that. And then I'll be back again on, I believe it is Monday. We will have some Emberwind coming at you with John Helfers and the gang. And on Tuesday evening, I'm very excited because we are going to have on Tuesday a big day starting with Adventures in Middle-earth. That will be coming up, and then that'll be Adventures in Middle-earth first, and then we will have at 4 p.m. D&D with 4 p.m. we'll have Pen and Pixels over on GOG with a surprise. I can't tell you what the surprise is, but it's going to be great. And then last but certainly not least, that evening we will feature the Our Vocalist, my voiceover team, with our annual production of A Christmas Carol, which is my favorite story. And you want to talk about something which hits all the senses, about something which does everything well. Christmas Carol is at it, from character development to wonderful plot to thematic consistency to emotional, passionate writing to just everything you want, man. It's all there. So that's going to be happening on Tuesday evening. So we got a busy few days ahead of us. But otherwise, I'll see you folks tomorrow, 10:30 Eastern, for my band's performance up in the Boston area, Cambridge, Massachusetts, at the Lily Pad, and then again Saturday, 7 p.m. for D&D Curse of Strahd. Thank you to everyone who made this an awesome stream tonight. Don't forget you can follow the channel, which is a really good way to help things. You can support us by checking out the YouTube !ArvTube, the Twitter with !ArvTweets. You can check out the Discord with !ArvCord, and you can check all of the schedule out for this month as well on arvineleron.com. You can also, of course, financially support us by checking out the merchandise area, !ArvShop, the Patreon, which is sitting right there, !ArvTreon, which allows you to get cool things for yourself, cool things for the channel, and last but certainly not least, that sub button, which Lone Wolf was happy enough to hit today, and which we really appreciate, and that, of course, allows you custom sub badges, gives you inspirations that you can help our various tabletop players with and all that good stuff. And it really does make a difference because it helps me support the channel and what we do. So I really do appreciate it. It really helps folks. So thank you so much for that. That's going to do it for me. Much love to all of you. Want to thank my wonderful mods and viewers for being here. Thank you to Lone Wolf, my sub, for being here. Thank you to Alfred Judicus, Aiton, Binkley. Of course, thank you to the amazing Cat Rambo. Thank you to C.T. Polk. Thank you to Commander Root, Dragon Spear. Thank you to Dr. Excelsior, Game Master's Vault, Lurks, Mubat, I guess, and you, Christensen. And thank you once again to Cat Rambo for an amazing class from the Rambo Academy for Wayward Writers. I will see all you lovely people tomorrow evening live from the Lily Pad. And until then, everyone be good to each other. Have a good night.
straight and true. With your mind untroubled by the questions in the dark, content to play your part, open pathways to your heart. With your life untainted by a host of broken dreams, when all your acts were queens, understood all that it means. Could you have understood the way your life was bound? Did you ever wonder how you got from there to now? Oh yes, you're gonna fly away from here, where the sky grows more clear, and your problems disappear, drift away down below. Watch them go down to your friends, where the trouble never ends, and there's always just one more day left to go. Go on and search now through your pile of broken lies, and your set of fake goodbyes, another cynical disguise. When will they catch you? All those little things you said, will it turn around instead? Blame the voices in your head. With all your subtle language, try and turn your life around. If your center gets unwound, you do your best to slow things down. And if you feel things that you never felt before, things that shook you to your core, a shattered truth you can ignore. Oh yes, you're gonna fly away from here, where the sky grows more clear, and your problems disappear, drift away down below. Watch them go down to your friends, where the trouble never ends, and there's always just one more day left to go. And when you've struggled and you keep on falling back, 'cause it's confidence you lack, you try and take a different tack. You can turn and face your demons, or you can give yourself a break. You can go a new direction, life is only what you make. When it comes to your own vision, when you got to see it through, you know you got to make it do. You know it's all been up to you. 'Cause here I stand here waiting, trying to make a brand new start. 'Cause it's finally dawned